Welcome back to the Home Path Podcast. This is Rafael. Today we're going to talk about the rent trap, why renting is more expensive than buying. So your rent is paying someone else's mortgage. What if you could be building that into your future wealth? And that's what happened to me when I bought my first home. The first thing I looked at is every single year the rent was going up, and my income was the same, and there was this imbalance that I was just seeing that year after year, the rent was going up, but the amount of money that I was making was the same. And I said, look, if I don't do something right now, I'm going to get to a point where I'm making the same, but my rent keeps going up. And from there, I started looking at like, what would be the possibility if I myself wanted to, purchase a home, what would happen? And the thing is that you get locked into a 30-year mortgage. And what does that mean? It just means you're locked into a certain interest rate, a certain payment. I mean, the only thing that could probably change is going to be your taxes and your insurance. That could change, but your principal and interest will always stay the same. So you're not going to get a letter and saying, hey, your principal and interest is going up. Unless you had one of those loans that like a variable one, which a lot of times most people don't offer anyway, especially since 2008. So that's one of the first things that you have to look at is if your rent continues to go up and you still make the same amount of money, you need to wake up, because there is going to be a time in the next couple of years where it's just not going to work. You need to either make more money, or you need to lock yourself into a payment that you can afford for a really long time, because maybe you love your career and that's okay. But just know that, you are going to get to a point where you're going to be capped out. So, your rent, it's really hard for it to equal your mortgage, depending on where you're going to live. If you're living coastal, it's a little bit harder. And sometimes you may have to make a couple sacrifices moving inland to try and make that equal. But, you can't really make more than a certain amount and then have majority of your money go towards rent or mortgage, because even when you get pre-qualified for a mortgage, you can't get approved more than 50% of what you're bringing in. And also, we have to include all of the expenses. So what I found is that renters usually get a rent notice, at the end of their lease, that the rent is going up. And on average, I've seen lately like $500, and that $500 a month is a lot of money. That is a lot of money for a lot of people that, they just can't do it. Even, with the husband and wife working, it's still a lot of money that just unexpectedly, and saying, look, in the next year, there's going to be an additional $6,000 that you could have used for disposable income to take the family to Disneyland, and now it's just going to go to rent. And it's a little bit harder for people to understand that, because maybe they're saying, well, is there $6,000 of benefit for us to live here? Has anything changed? And sometimes the answer is no. Nothing has really changed. It's just that it's going to be $500 more a month to live there. And, it's really hard for people to wrap their head around that. But the first thing you have to do is to wake up, and you have to look at how much it's really costing you, because there's a cost of waiting. That's what it's called. The longer you wait, the more you're going to pay. So you're never going to time this correctly. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to say that things are going to collapse, things are going to happen. And they've been saying that for the last, 10 years. But guess what? Over the last 10 years, you're still paying rent. No matter your feelings or what you think, because you're reading this article or that article. I'm plugged into the industry. So even if you were speculating for the last 10 years, guess what? Those that bought 10 years ago, their equity went up and their balance went down. That's the one thing that is for sure that I have seen for someone that bought 10 years ago, is that the equity went up, meaning the value of that property that they bought went up. And also the balance of their debt went down from the property because they kept paying it down. So that's that's where you get a big gap, right? And they have options now. The problem with renting is that you don't have a lot of options. You can't be at the end of 10 years of renting and look back and say, maybe I want to take my equity and go do something else. No, you can't just walk away from renting with equity. There is no equity in renting. There is no equity in just, renting, because that's it. It's gone, right? So a lot of times renting for most people, it's not even an option. And for some who, rent a big old house and run masterminds and use it as a tax write-off and do all of these tactical things, that may work for them. But I mean, for the majority working class, what happens is that year after year, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get a rent notice, and it's painful. It's painful to get, because every single year you just know that it's going to increase, and your quality of life goes down every single year because that happens. So the first thing you have to do is say, am I okay with that? And if the answer is no, then you have to head in the right direction and say, look, there is a cost for me waiting, for me not doing anything, and the cost can add up over the years. For some people, that's $6,000 a year on top of the regular rent. So you have your regular rent, and then you have a notice that's saying, hey, by the way, we're going to need an additional $6,000 a year in order for you to live here. And then you go to your job and say, hey, can I get a raise for an extra $6,000 a year because my rent went up? They're going to look at you crazy, right? Because that just doesn't happen. And the way you make more money is that you have to become more valuable. Go learn a new skill. A lot of times, people want to get a raise just because they've been there for some time. But a lot of times, the more you become more valuable, you get to, command, higher prices. You have to bring some sort of value or learn a new skill. So a lot of times when you're renting, it's costing you more because it just gets more expensive over time. So it is a trap that you could say, look, I'm going to stay here and do the same thing. But eventually over the next 5 years, 10 years, it will catch up to you, because ever since the beginning of time, no one's ever waited to rent for rent prices to go down. It just doesn't happen. You don't hear someone say, I'm going to wait to rent for rent prices to go down. But you always hear people say, I'm going to wait to buy for the prices to go down. You're never going to time the market. Never going to time the market, because it just there's an imbalance. Whether you're waiting for the interest rates to drop, but guess what? As soon as the interest rates drop, then everyone and their mom is going to go get pre-qualified and say, look, interest rates are cheaper and I want to buy a house. But guess what? Everybody else is too. So now you're going to get into a bidding war, because now, all of these, 30, 40 different people are going to start submitting offers for the home that you want. So you have to look at all of the factors of buying a home. It's not just what feels good to you, or you read an article, or sadly, what I see a lot now when people quote things, they quote them off an app called TikTok. Well, I saw this on TikTok. Well, I'm sorry, but a lot of times they think that those social media platforms are some sort of, some news outlet that could be trustworthy because they heard a buzzword or something like that. And a lot of times they just continue to wait until this magical day will happen where the home prices go down. And if you're one of those people that are saying, look, I'm going to wait for the home prices to go down, then I have a question for you. Like, by how much? Are you going to wait for them to go down $2,500, $25,000, $250,000? You don't know that. You don't know the magical number. It's just something nice for you to say, that it makes you feel good about the situation that you're in, that you're going to wait for the prices to go down. But there is no magic number or formula that, okay, when the houses go down this dollar amount, I'm going to do it. But the reality is that sometimes these houses go down in prices because a lot of things different happen. Like the families stop moving in the winter because kids are in school, and there's not a whole lot of activity. So those people that overpriced their home are now having to sit with them for 30, 60, 90 days and saying, look, if you really want to sell this, you need to start bringing down the price because we really overpriced it. So it's not necessarily that you see a price reduction and start thinking that the prices of the homes are coming down. It just means that they went a little bit above and beyond because they thought that they were going to get a certain amount, and then the interest rates are still pretty high. So there's a lot of factors of why they haven't sold that property, why they're discounting it or reducing the price. So it's not always that something bad is happening in the economy. It just means it's bad timing. And then you'll see it in the summer where kids get out of school and families want to move. And guess what? It's a buying frenzy. So now you start seeing all these prices go up. And it's a revolving cycle since the beginning of time, is that people move and they move all the time. So a lot of times it's trying to buy a home when it's not summer, because you're going to get a really good deal. Not a whole lot of people are moving. The house has been sitting there for a long time. So it's a good time for you to actually start looking at buying a property during that time, because there's not a whole lot of activity that you're up against. So I hope that helps. And if you are a renter and you're trying to time the economy, it's not going to happen. A lot of times you're working, you got other things to factor in. There's a whole lot of different factors of what's going to happen, with timing it. But one thing's for sure, if you're going to pull the trigger, you got to do it, because the sooner you get into your home, the sooner you start paying down the balance. And then that's kind of when the clock starts ticking. Just, every 10 years, if you look back, go pull up any property that was around in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010, 2020. Start looking at every year and just seeing how much it has gone up. Some properties have doubled in price every 10 years. And that's what I'm saying. Don't take my word for it. Go look at the prices. And, a property that was, still there in the 70s is not what it was in the 80s and in the 90s and the 2000s. And, I don't know where it's going to go, but it has not since the beginning of time. There was a point in, the 2008 era that there was a lot of homes in the market. And a lot of people think that it's going to go back, or that we're going to get, those pandemic interest rates that, we're never going to get back. So a lot of times you're waiting for something just to make yourself feel good. But in the end, it's costing you more, because no matter what, you're choosing to rent. You're choosing to say, yes, there's going to be another rent increase, and I'm still going to be paying that rent increase because I think that I'm the expert in waiting. Well, the waiting does have a price to it. So, like I said, you can choose to continue to wait, or you can continue to say, you know what, I'm going to make an effort to purchase a property, because there is going to be no timing. You already lost all this time speculating when you should have gone into the market. So I think that's what people, when I talk to them, they don't understand. Okay, how long have you been speculating? 6 years. Okay. And then what's your average rent over the last 3 years? Oh, well, it's $3,000. Okay, $3,000 times 12, that's $36,000 times 6 years. That's $216,000 that you've paid in rent speculating. So it's quite comical, because I said, okay, while you're here, scheming, speculating, reading all these news for the last 6 years, you've already paid $216,000 in rent. And there's nothing you can tell me different that you could have at least put that into a mortgage over the last 6 years while you're still speculating if the market's going to crash. Because at the end of the day, it's already gone. You've already paid it. So if you want to sit there and speculate, start adding up all the years that you've been doing that, and the numbers add up, that it doesn't make sense. It makes more sense if you're willing, able, and capable, and you have the ability. It at least will protect you from, at least just that, from getting a rent increase. And at that, you're going to be winning. So that's all I got for you today. I will see you on the next episode.